podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to the How Are the podcast from Roker Report. And that's still difficult to say, still not quite rolling off the tongue. I keep saying the How Are the podcast, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. So you catch us after our frustrating 1-1 draw at home to Preston North End. And you might have already heard me and Martin discuss the game in a bit of detail. And it shows how quickly we record these things after the final whistle, because neither me or Martin had noticed Bristol City scoring a late equaliser at Sheffield United. So we assumed they'd get all 3 points. But to be fair, I'm not actually sure that would have made us feel any better. So it doesn't really matter, I suppose, on that front.
Genuinely worse, I think, Chris.
Yeah, well, actually, we'll find out today. Maybe this is the second part of the therapy, I think. But, I have a couple of people with me today to briefly discuss the game. You've already heard one of them, as well as preparing for the Coventry game at the weekend, as well as potentially taking a bit of stock and hearing how things are around the place with our special guest today. But I do, of course, need to firstly welcome the familiar voice of Gav, who was at the Stadium Light, as usual, to see us take on Preston. Hello, Gavin.
Hello. Yes, I was there, unfortunately. I say unfortunately that the whole experience was ruined for me, not by the referee or by Preston or by the fact we just weren't very good, but by a corporate box full of ladies who were very drunk behind the southwest corner, banging on the boards the whole second half, screaming at the top of their lungs when there was no other noise or anything actually going on. I think I'm still deaf from that experience. Anybody who was in the southwest corner last night will have probably heard all of that, and I'm kind of still reeling from that, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, you've had a bit of time to reflect on the game. So, how are you feeling about the point that we eventually got?
I think, to be honest, if you just view it as a one sort of game of football between two teams who are in the same division and competing for the same thing, I think it was a fair result, if I'm honest. I know a lot of people will be disappointed that we got the point, and I am to a degree. But I think just as a game of football, we got what we deserved, to be honest. I don't think we particularly played very well. There's probably a degree of it where, I think Preston will feel disappointed. And I know their manager actually said after the game that he felt like they should have came away with 3 points. So yeah, I think even having slept on it, I felt exactly the same last night. I think we got what we deserved and probably what we expected as well. I mean, you go back to the preview show that we did with George from the Lancashire Telegraph.
Post.
Lancashire Post, sorry.
You're right.
Yeah, keep us right, mate. But if you go back to that, you both said 1-1. I was the optimistic one on that conversation. So you called it, mate. That was the result in the end, and I think that's probably what we all expected at the deepest pits of our stomachs.
Oh, that's it. You kind of expect a grey draw against Preston. but we did mention that we might get a taste of how things are around the club at the moment, as well as talking about that game, because we have a regular Roker Report contributor, and probably more importantly, the BBC Radio Newcastle commentator Nick Barnes with us. Hello, Nick.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going okay. I mean, I think, the game against Preston has left a bit of a... it's left plenty of talking points, from the Bristol City or the Sheffield United and the Burnley results and the referee, and so sort of the whole evening sort of coloured by everything that sort of kicked off in the second half, and then the other scores at the end, where Sunderland yet again goes back to that game against Plymouth when Hull had beaten Sheffield United, and they've missed an opportunity to narrow the gap on the top three. But so in the cold light of day, they didn't lose. They are still fourth. I think that top four is going to be the top. That is immutable now. They will be probably in those positions. Maybe I think Burnley and Sheffield United might switch about. I think Leeds will probably win the title, but I'm more worried now in a sense about Coventry at the weekend after Coventry's defeat at Derby, and after Sunderland's sort of lacklustre performance against Preston. That's a bit of a worry for me.
Well, yeah, we'll come on to that because I've got a slightly different take on that, but we'll come on to that. Just out of interest, were you bothered about the ladies in the southwest corner?
I wasn't aware of the ladies in the
He
southwest.
was a million miles from the ladies in the southwest corner.
We're a million miles from everyone where we sit.
Well, George was talking about that. He was talking about the vantage point from the press at the Stadium of Light, and because from my point of view, when I've been up high, sometimes you can see kind of things panning out before they actually happen, a couple of minutes before they happen, where somebody's out of position or anything. Because he said he didn't like it up there. I mean, what's it like for a commentator up there?
Well, we might as well be on the roof, in all fairness, but it's not great. I mean, we're lucky that Sunderland's numbers are impossible to read, even fairly close. So luckily, because we know Sunderland so well, the sort of body shapes and statures. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing because some players do sort of look similar sometimes from a long way up. So you always pray when the opposition come that they got big, bold numbers on their backs, because otherwise we would really struggle to read them. And I know that's a problem for away commentators with the Sunderland shirts because they can't read the Sunderland numbers. It's too high. They're a bit too much like Subbuteo players. We ideally, if you know where the directors and the board sit, next to them is where the scouts sit. And as often as not, there are very few people in those seats. Ideally, we'd like to see the press box move to that level. So you still got that overview. As you say, you get the overview of the game, but in much closer proximity to the players, probably more. That's generally the height that we're at other stadiums. But here at Sunderland, we're so far up, it's we're in the gods, basically.
Yeah. Me and Gav were talking about it back in the day when it first opened. It was down low, just above.
Down below, it's behind the dugouts.
What was that? Why was that change made? I didn't even know.
Basically, the change was made, ostensibly because the argument was that if Sunderland got into Europe, they would need X number of seats. I think the reason I think we all believe it was moved is because those seats at the bottom were, they could sell them for good money. So the seats at the top of the Premier Concourse, right at the back of the stand, they'd struggled to sell. So I think it was deemed that let's put the media up there and let's sell let's make some money on the seats further down. So it was, I think it was driven financially, basically, because they couldn't sell the seats.
Maybe think yourself lucky it wasn't like the crow's nest that you used to have at Roker Park. That was on top.
Don't give them any ideas.
That actually was on the roof at that point. But I mean, just going in terms of the performance, Nick, I mean, we've talked a lot on Roker Report and on this pod recently about this type of performance. And I've actually said that I didn't think this type of performance was really a one-off. And a lot of home games have followed this pattern that the Preston game fell into. I mean, how much do you think this is down to kind of our approach, which is being talked about a lot? The fact that sometimes we sit off maybe when we take the lead, or how much do we just have to think that we come up against sides who are well organised, and sometimes we just have to give them credit?
I think it's a bit of both. Funnily enough, I had this conversation with Radio Lancashire's commentator last night. He was asking me about the Stadium of Light and the atmosphere, and he was expecting it to be bouncing and Sunderland to come out all guns blazing. I said, well, that's just not going to happen. I mean, if you're lucky, you might see Sunderland start as they did against Cardiff at the weekend. And for 15 minutes, I thought they played very, very well. And they probably, they arguably should have been 2 or 3-0 up, not 1-0 up. And when Patrick Roberts went off against Cardiff, they did that sort of performance level, that energy level seemed to drop off a cliff. And we reverted to, as last night, as Preston, you're absolutely right. They sit off. They lose that energy. They lose that drive. They lose. That's the buzzword, isn't it now? The press, and they lose the press. And I think they only found that press again when Mundell came on in the second half with Rig. I thought the pair of them coming on actually re-energised the team. And the irony was then they got re-energised, and it was Preston who went down the other end and scored. And then it took that whole incident with the time wasting and everything else for the crowd to get energized again, the team to get angry. And so you wonder what it takes for Sunderland to start games brightly and energetically and quickly, because when they do, they cause teams problems. They just don't do it enough. And Regis Le Bris, often says in his pre-match press conferences, we need to start brightly. We need to be more clinical. But as often as not, the opposition take the advantage and they start brightly, and Sunderland struggle to They've done it away from home as well. It takes them 20 minutes to get into the game. And you wish that they could just start much more brightly and quickly and take the game to the opposition. And the other, as I say, I think it's partly the opposition as well. I mean, Paul Heckingbottom obviously changed his team last night to reflect what Sunderland, or what he thought Sunderland were likely to do. And they were very much up for it. And I think you've got to accept that a lot of teams do come to the stadium like now, knowing where Sunderland are in the table, knowing that it's going to be, in their minds, it's going to be a difficult place to come. And in fact, actually, they probably are quite surprised it's not as difficult as they probably thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, on that, Gav, I mean, I'm interested to hear what you say, because obviously you're in the crowd and you hear some of the frustrations, or you get a sense of things when you sat there during the game. But we've talked, in chats and things like that sometimes we do forget about who we're actually playing, and you've got to remember there's another team on the pitch.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the big frustrations for me sat there at the game, because I'm surrounded by people who all have opinions, who all go through the emotions during the game. And I kind of think there's been a point where, and I don't know when it was, but there's been a point where we are viewed within the fan base as perhaps a lot better than we are. I think we're a cracking team. We're fourth in the table, but I still maintain we're overachieving. I think with the group of players we've got a fantastic group. It's definitely right up there in terms of the rest of the championship. But I don't think we're the type of team who are going to go and play everybody off the park. We've shown that, well, virtually every game this season. We haven't really had a complete end-to-end performance. And there was a lot of talk going into this game, and actually for a few weeks now, people wanting to see Mayenda and Isidore play up front together, and in many respects just taking the handbrake off. And I'm not so sure that it's possible, because he went out there, he put two up front, he had two fairly attacking wingers, he brought in an attacking left back for Hjelde. I mean, as far as 09 and Mepham go, very progressive central defenders who try to get the ball in the midfield quickly. Trey Humes bagging assists every single week at the minute, it feels like. So for me, that is about as attacking as we get. And we didn't dominate the game. I just don't think it's in our makeup. We're not set up to dominate games in the way that I think a lot of people want us to. So knowing that, when you go to the game and you listen to what people are saying, people are getting pissed off, but I sort of understand it, but I just think, well, the evidence is in front of us. We've played 30-odd games this season and it just hasn't happened. Maybe it's just not in our makeup. Yeah.
And actually, Gav touched on that, two up top, Nick, and that change that he's made. And I think it was Sheffield United. I know he did it against Sheffield United, but I can't remember whether that was the last time. But there is this talk about taking the handbrake off, but it's almost asking, what does that actually mean? And when you've done so well playing in with one style and one formation and one setup, it's almost thinking, well, it's done so well this far, why almost rip it up and do something else?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Gav has just said there about the expectation of this team. And funnily enough, I was reminding someone last night that a couple of months ago, we had fans coming on Total Sport saying, oh, this team's going to beat a team 5 or 6-0 at some point. Well, as Gav says, it's just not set up to do that. It's not a team that's going to do that to another team. And interesting that he went to up front last night. And ironically, he does that and Isidore has an off night. And then I thought Mayenda was the player who looked more likely to score, and he was the player that was taken off. I mean, Regis explained why afterwards, but I thought it was the wrong decision, because I did think Mayenda was probably likelier to get a goal than Isidore. But Regis has been saying over the last few weeks, it's against the vein for him to play two up front. He doesn't like losing the extra midfielder. So he his preferred option is to play the one and have the extra midfielder, but then be able to change it in the 60th or 65th minute and bring on a second striker if he needs that two-pronged attack. Well, he sort of did it in reverse last night. But as Gav said, 30-odd games. We've played nearly 40 games now this season. And, it's often been cited that they're difficult to beat. They've not lost, the games they've lost, it's only been by a goal. So they are clearly a hard team to break down. But I think by the way they set up, they are also, they labour to score goals. I mean, I spoke to Trey Hume after the game last night, and one of the points I made to him was something that I talked to Patrick Roberts about. they've got that, that you can't complain in any sense, shape or form about Hume's work rate, his passing, his defending. Roberts gets on the ball, draws defenders. Work rate is tremendous. But both of them, I think, undeniably, and Patrick agrees, and Trey didn't disagree last night and thought it was a fair criticism. They should be getting more goals. We should be getting more goals from Patrick Roberts, more goals from Trey Hume, more goals from the centre halves. But we don't seem set up to do that. And I don't know what that is, whether Hume gets up to the edge of the penalty area, gets around the box, but he's not getting in the box like he did last season, the season before. I don't know whether that's something mentally or subconsciously that they feel that it's not their place to do that because of the way that Regis has set the team up. But there is a sort of sense that the handbrake is slightly on, and you'd just like to see them release it. I think Job now, having got through the yellow card amnesty, we may see him get back to his stronger game, because I think he's been playing within himself these last few weeks in a bid to avoid that 10th yellow card, which is something I put to Regis Le Bris, and he didn't deny that. He felt the same. He felt probably only natural that Job was going to, manage the games he's played in. But I think now he knows he's not under that sort of, that's hanging over his head. I think we might see Job get more involved as he was at the start of the season, which I think, we've been missing that sort of engine room, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about the top two with the changes he made, but looking at the team selection, Nick, there were a few eyebrows raised with the likes of Mundle coming out, maybe Brown coming out after getting back into the team, especially with the form of Mundle and how he came back. But I've noticed recently in press conferences, the manager keeps mentioning how he needs to manage the squad, which is something I kind of want to circle back on. But I think quite a few people were surprised to see Watson come back in so soon. But it suggests that the rest of the season is going to be this balancing act between keeping players fresh and trying to get some rhythm into the side.
I think last night, in some sense, I was surprised. In the other sense, I looked at the other side of it and thought, yeah, Mundle's just come back from however long he was out, and he's been playing. And I wonder if it was just a bid to give him a rest ahead of the game against Coventry at the weekend. So I sort of saw some sense in that. And he needs to get Watson. He needs to get minutes for Watson. And I think probably expected a better performance, with all due respect to Tommy, last night. I didn't feel he got into the game like we know Tommy can do. But it's valuable minutes for him. Alan Brown was a bit of a surprise. I thought he might play him because it's Preston and it's his former club and he's back in the team. And it's yet another probably difficult conversation that Regis Le Bris has had to have with a player. I mean, I spoke to Chris Mepham after the game at the weekend and asked him about the time that, he was dropped for Ballard and how difficult that conversation was. And he basically said, yes, it was difficult. It wasn't a conversation I wanted to have, but he respected Regis Le Bris's honesty. He said I had no complaints coming out of his office in terms of the approach he took, and he was transparent and he was honest. I assume he's had that same conversation now with Alan Brown. He's had that conversation with Isidore, who he admits wasn't entirely happy about not starting the last couple of games. And Mayenda, he was asked how Mayenda's, is he mature and is he reacted to not starting games well? And he basically said no. So I think he's very aware of players' sensibilities, but he's also very aware that he does need to confront them head on. And so I think we will see more of this movement in the next couple of weeks, because they need momentum going into the playoffs without question. And, a game like last night doesn't actually provide that for them. I think he needs to. I think what he's ideally looking to try and do is get Mundle back in on the left. He's been, the blight for him was that Lefay got injured when he did, because just as Mundle got fit and he was going to move Lefay into the middle, Lefay got injured. So he's not been helped in that respect. I think we all probably agree Rigg needed a break and needed a breather, but I think he'll try and get Rigg back in as the number 10, Roberts on the right, and almost certainly it'll be Isidore up front on his own, and Mayenda will be coming in off the bench.
Yeah. I mean, Gav, just quickly, because me and Martin spent quite a bit of time kind of talking about it. I'd be interested to hear what you think, because, I think this is a big point coming at, what is it, 9 games left, I think it is, until what is likely to be a playoff campaign afterwards. But this balancing act of keeping players fit and trying to gather momentum, like Nick's just said, I mean, where do you sit on that? Because it seems like a fine balance that the manager's got to find.
I think it's the correct approach, if I'm honest. I think we don't want to go into look, we've accepted it. I think we have, even if they're not talking about it on the training ground, they may well be. They may be talking about the fact that this is the way we're going to do it now because we're expecting to be in the playoffs. I don't know. But I think when you think back to that playoff campaign under Tony Mowbray, where we were about as threadbare as it could possibly be, I think we played the first game against Luton with Gooch, Roberts, Cirkin and 09 as a back four. Look, I'm not saying it's going to be that extreme, but you can see what can happen if you let this spiral and you don't have the options available to you, that, you know, the injuries mount up, the problems keep coming, and then you end up in a position where you're sort of snookered, really, and you're not going into it with the best picture ahead when it comes to your squad. So I think it's the right approach. I think what he's doing now is managing minutes. Whether people like it or not, they're going to have to come out the team from time to time. I mean, we've had 2 games this week, another one coming up on Saturday. You just can't play your best team in every single game, because what's going to happen is there's going to be drops in form. There's going to be muscle strains, muscle injuries, which we've been badly burnt with this season. We've already lost Mundell. We've already lost Watson. There are others who've had bad injuries this season. And I just think all this is them being very, very smart with it. I mean, you look at the gap we've got between ourselves and 7th place. It would be a ridiculous run of results, both in terms of the amount of games we would have to lose and then the teams to make up the points for us to not finish in the playoffs. So I think this is just an opportunity that we've got to take. Like, how often does any team in the playoffs go with sort of 10 games to go, however it's been? Well, we know we're going to be in the playoffs. We're not going to drop out. We're probably out of the automatic promotion race. So this is an opportunity to actually manage ourselves properly and get this. You want to have as many of your players available, fit and fresh for that first semi-final. It doesn't matter who we're playing against. Let's get that out of our heads. Let the rest of the teams in the league take care of that. We've just got to make sure we're the best version of ourselves for that. And I actually think that maybe the injury to Lafay maybe made him reassess in his own mind how to do this, because there's definitely been a change over the last couple of weeks. All of a sudden, we're just seeing rotation. I mean, it felt like rotation for rotation's sake when we played Sheff Wed. I kind of looked at the team and I was like, bloody hell, I wasn't expecting that. But it worked. We won the game. And yeah, it just seems like it's very measured from his point of view. And it's interesting. Like I keep saying, it's his favourite word, interesting, but it is interesting because how often has a team been able to have this opportunity over the years? I would hazard not very often.
Yeah. Well,
I think the team would have been, if Roberts hadn't gone off after 25 minutes at the weekend, I think Roberts wouldn't have played last night. I think that would have been the plan. So we'd have seen a different team last night. And if that had been the case, it would have been interesting to see whether he'd still gone 2 up front or whether he'd have brought Mayenda in on the right and left Isidore up front on his own. But so that rotation is occurring, and it'll be interesting. I mean, I assume at Coventry on Saturday, we're going to change again. Mundell will be back in on the left hand side.
Yep.
Rig will probably be back in as well. So there'll be changes again. But I mean, Gav's absolutely right about the momentum. I think they've got to find a solution. And Regis is always for solutions and processes. They need to find a solution ahead of that first semi-final. Because we saw what happened, as Gav pointed out, with Luton, how they were in bits by the time they got to that second leg.
Yeah.
And so they need to, and I agree with Gav entirely. It doesn't really matter who they play, because we have all this debate about, do we want to face West Bromwich Albion with Tony Mowbray? Do we want to face Middlesbrough after all the antics at the end of the game at the Riverside? Do we want to face Coventry? Well, it doesn't really matter, because if you're going to get to Wembley and get to the Premier League, you're going to have to face probably one of those teams, because you're going to play two teams to get through. So it's almost law of, average is one of those teams. Sunderland going to have to face them. So don't worry about that. Just worry about yourselves going into the semi-final and be you're as tip-top as you possibly can be with the injuries that they've got.
Yeah. And interestingly, you talking about making the playoffs, we've now got the same number of points that we had when we made the playoffs under Tony Mowbray. We've got 69 points. So that's something at least.
We're not going down. That's one thing.
But I want to just get get back to the game because it raises kind of another point on this side. But I want to kind of focus on that fuss at the end, the palaver, if you like.
No.
Preston kind of kicked off. I mean, I had a bit of a rant about it on the review, on the fact that it was a little bit embarrassing how a referee could so quickly lose control of a game. So just to kick us off, Nick, I mean, what was your take on the whole thing? Because it just seemed to spiral.
Well, it did spiral, and I think the referee, to my mind, undoubtedly lost control of the situation. He wrested control to Paul Heckingbottom and the Preston bench, even so far as, if you notice, that they made 5 substitutions last night. It looked like they'd made them at 4 different times, which you're not allowed to do. It's only 3. But the reason they got away with it was because that third substitution in the 83rd minute, the double substitution, that was when Potts came over and sat down in front of the dugouts with a hamstring problem. And because the ball was still in the arms of the referee and play hadn't recommenced, when they made the next substitution, it was 85 minutes. So it looks like there's a 2-minute gap, or there is a 2-minute gap between the substitutions being made. So it looked like they made 4, if you like, substitutions. In fact, they technically only made the 3. So I think they knew what they were doing. They were playing the game there. The whole nonsense with Kessler Hayden, who kept on going down and trying to drag himself back on the pitch from the touchline, knew exactly what he was doing. Magoma not going off, and it was Michael Proctor who alerted the officials. And someone said to me afterwards, Michael shouldn't have said anything, just let them play on and get themselves embroiled in, the mess that would have ensued, because the referee didn't know what was going on. But basically the referee lost control, and it handed all that authority to Preston to take the mick, basically, as much as they possibly liked, in terms of, time wasting. And as it happened, the irony was, all it did was end up biting Preston on the backside, because Sunderland, the players were angry, the crowd was angry, everybody got worked up, and Preston paid the price. But they were then happy to sit out for a point. But it's a shame it was to happen. If they'd got so wound up a little bit earlier in the game, I think Sunderland would have gone on them on it. But yeah, it was a farce, really.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this was my point. And, what Preston were doing, obviously, like you said, it got us fired up. But I'm not sure that we get the draw if Preston calmly see the game out without poking the bear like they did. But, I mean, I'll be interested to hear what Gav's take is on this. But Nick, I mean, do you think that's an issue with this side, where sometimes we don't look like we've got that fight unless we're poked like that?
Well, it's a good point, because Marco Gabbiadini consistently this season is making the point that Sunderland get fouled more than any other team, and the referees don't do anything about it. And I think his point is that he'd like to see Sunderland get fired up more, just have a little bit more fight in them. And I think we are. I think Sunderland, you can look at them and you can say, yeah, that they're nice. They're a nice team. You don't really. I mean, apart from Trey Hume, who is very, he is very physical, and he's not afraid to put, his feet into a tackle, and not a side that really gets in and about, and they're not narky. I know Luke O'Nien's got a reputation for being narky, but he's not narky. He's not as narky now as he used to be. And we don't seem to have. Look at Ryan Porteous last night. I think, he gets booked, but he's still consistently trying to wind Sunderland up, even though he's at risk of picking up a second yellow card, because he probably knows, with his experience, in the back of his mind, he can niggle away following the yellow card. The referee's not going to do anything about it, in the same way the referee wasn't going to book Woodman a second time for time wasting, because they never do. And I think when you've got experience in the team, the players are very canny like that. And most teams that Sunderland are coming up against in the Championship have got experienced midfielders. They've got experience in the middle who know how to play the game, know how to play the referees. And I think that's where Sunderland are a bit light. I think that's where they lack. That's when we talk about the team needs some older heads. I think that's one of the areas where they need that sort of older head in the team.
Yeah. And I know you like a good tackle to get things going, Gav. But I mean, from sitting in the stands, I mean, first of all, what was your, what was kind of coming through from the pitch? Like, what were people's reactions in the stands? And the other thing is, Do you get that sometimes? You know, I mean, me and Martin mentioned the likes of Roy Keane just saying, you know, sometimes he just needed to get the team up and just needed to smash someone to get the team fired up about something, you know, if the game wasn't going to plan. I mean, where do you sit on the, you know, on that? And what was your take on the whole thing as well?
In terms of what happened during the game, I think I just echo what Nick said. I think the referee absolutely bottled it. He just didn't have control of any of it, and it's irritating because he's the man with the most authority on the pitch. Ultimately, he should be able to stand in the middle of it and go, "This isn't going to happen on my watch. There's a yellow for you. There's a yellow for you. Stuart McCall. There's a yellow for you. You sit down." That's all he's got to do. But instead, and I think this isn't something I've just noticed in this game, but generally in the Premier League all the way down when I watch football nowadays. But the referees prefer now to just step back and let the situation play out in front of them and then step in once they've had a chance to speak to their assistants. But it was a farce. It was an absolute farce. I mean, I've genuinely never seen anything like that in a game of football ever. I mean, I've seen time waste, and we see it practically every time a team comes to the Stadium of Light, but I have never ever seen anything as bad as that. And the fact that we were stood in the stands watching it and going, well, I bet you he doesn't put 8 or 9 minutes on. We kind of expect that to happen, and then to be kind of punished for being the team who's on the other side of it. I was actually really surprised that he put 9 minutes on.
I think we were all surprised there was 9. I mean, everyone's like you, were expecting them to put 1 minute up or something.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. But I mean, echoing that about the referees, Cardiff, Darren Bond, that incident where he stopped the play from the free kick for a drop ball to Cardiff, because basically the referee afterwards, it transpired, said he thought Mepham and MG were going to scrap, and he intervened to stop them having a fight. Well, why didn't he let the ball run out for the corner and then have a word and stop it? Because they didn't have a fight. They broke up. And yet he stopped play to intervene to stop potentially something happening which never looked like it was going to happen. It was a bizarre... I mean, but he's a Premier League referee. And I mean, I think Lewis Smith has refereed in the Premier League, but it was... I think the standard of refereeing overall this season has not been great. And generally... the Premier League referees are the ones that are coming in for the greatest criticism. And I think the criticism stems from they work so much with VAR that they, like you said, Gav, they stand back and they're waiting for someone else to make a decision for them.
Yeah.
Gav's mentioned this a few times, actually, in terms of referees coming back down who are used to VAR, and then almost they have to make a decision because they almost forget that VAR's not going to help them out and sort of a situation like that out for them. I was going to ask as well, Nick, was there any reaction from the players or managers after the game?
Well, Regis sort of made light of it. I think he probably didn't want to talk himself into trouble, but he joked about having, I've never encountered this before. I've never had to play 12 men before, blah, blah, blah. So he sort of moved on as quickly as possible. But Trey Hume was angry. And I said, well, would you have been involved and gone across to the referee and tried to, have a conversation with the referee? He said, yes, but I was on the yellow card. So he said, I just stayed. He said, I was forced to stay well out of it because I just couldn't risk going in. And he said, and that's the frustration. You can talk to the referees and you can try and get your point across because they don't really take it on board. They don't really listen. But at the same time, the referees got to be aware that the players are angry. I mean, you could see the anger was brewing because of the farcical nature of what was going on. And you could see what Preston were trying to do. And yet the referee didn't really do anything to calm that whole situation or basically nip it in the bud. And it allowed Preston, as I said, to wrest control of it and just then drive the way that the game was being refereed.
Yeah. And
just to come back to something you asked us before, Chris, because I didn't answer it. But in terms of players getting, but in terms of players getting stuck in and just putting a big tackle in or something and showing a bit of authority on the pitch, I think it kind of feeds into the conversation we've just had that actually the players are refereeing the games in their own minds now, and they're a little bit reluctant to do things which they probably should be able to do. In terms of, well, am I going to be reprimanded for just trying to play the game at pace? It's a physical contact game. I should be allowed to make big tackles. But, other than Trey Hume, you don't see it. And I just think that's the way the game's played now. I actually think it's been sanitised to the point that players are reluctant to do it. And it's annoying because, maybe that comes with experience, and maybe when if you've played 300 games in the Championship or whatever, and you've seen it and done it all, maybe that is something where you know when to do it. But I think the more and more time goes on, we're probably going to see less and less of it. There's not going to be. Trey Hume's probably a rare breed for his age of player who does that. How many young players are really physical on the pitch these days? I think it's just been the game's been sanitized to a point where it's got like that, but that's a conversation for another day, I guess.
Yeah, because I remember the days when John Kay used to referee games, which was far more entertaining. And the other thing, I can't remember anything like that happening since we played Tranmere in the FA Cup nearly 30 years ago, and I was there that day, and I remember Sunderland fans actually shouting they had an extra player, but nobody took any notice. But just going back to the evening in general, because obviously Burnley and Sheffield United drawn on the same night. I mean, Nick, do you think that was our last chance to really put pressure on those sides? And do you get the feeling now like the club are focusing and planning for the playoffs?
I've always felt they 8 points as it was before the game was probably too much to claw back, because I think Sunderland will lose 1-2 games before the end of the season. I think they got some difficult games. I think the Coventry game at the weekend, West Bromwich Albion away. There's some other sort of what you describe as maybe benign games, but then they themselves, as Preston showed, can be potentially difficult games. I mean, Swansea's one that comes to mind. You think Swansea have got nothing to play for, but there's no pressure on them. There are teams now that they're going to come up against who've got no worries about promotion, no worries about relegation, no fears, and no pressure to play. So none of the games will be easy. But I do think that Sunderland, they've not been grinding out the results as Sheffield United and Burnley and Leeds have been doing. Those potential banana skins have sort of reared their head like Hull, and dropping a couple of points against Preston. So I think they will carry on in their own way. They'll grind out wins at home. They'll probably do all right away from home. But I think what you're basically hoping for is Burnley, Sheffield United, one of them to lose 3 games. I just don't see that that's going to happen in the 9 games that are left. Sunderland can't afford to slip up, and they've got to, they basically got to try and find 9 points from somewhere. And I think now, the way the team's playing, and I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, and as if you look back at the last few weeks, as we've dropped away and kind of almost lost contact with the automatic places, have you had a sense of almost a change of mood around the place at all, where you can almost feel that there's a little bit of disappointment, or do you think that the players have always thought that as long as they're in the playoff mix, as long as they're in the top 6, then they just keep plugging away, or has there been a change? Because there's been things going on, obviously, with high-profile mistakes. I mean, you think of Patterson as well, and sometimes when these things can start snowballing in people's mentality, and then people's heads start to drop.
I think part of me thinks it's an overall fatigue, not a tiredness in terms of tiredness of legs or anything like that. I've just got a sense that maybe one of the reasons he's changing players around a lot at the moment is to try and find a way of freshening things up and re-energizing the team. He's spoken about the training ground last week, and that they've changed a few things. They've reduced a few things that they're doing, because I think we're 38 games in, and it feels like it's been a really, really long season. I think part of that was because the first part of the season up until Christmas, we seemed to be having these 3-game weeks with 2 away games in every 3-game week. And that became, I think it felt really laborious by the time we got into the new year. And I think now we've reached that point where we've got into the spring, you're 4th, you have only points clear of 5th. And there's a general, I think, not a malaise, but a fatigue over the length of the seat, just the length of how it feels at the moment. And then what we're trying to find is a spark somewhere to, we need a cattle prod, if you like, in the team for these last 9 games to take into the playoffs. And I think that's part of the rotation and trying to freshen things up and re-energize, just get everybody back in that groove, if you like, for the final games.
Well, just kind of on that topic, because we've seen the manager's personality this season, and it seems to be a very different one. But from your point of view, how is the manager to deal with from the point of view of reporting? Because you've seen a lot of different styles of manager. Looking back to Alex Neil, who I always thought his press conferences were entertaining. I always made sure I saw those because he was quite, I don't know, let's say on the front foot is a way to put Alex Neil in press conferences. And then you've got Tony Mowbray, who would come in and have a chocolate and share, things like that. And he seemed to be an arm around the shoulder. So where does this current manager sit in with all that?
Well, he's very focused. I think he's very comfortable to deal with in the sense that you can ask him anything. Now, whether you get a long, concise, well thought out answer or a very short, I agree, you tend to know now which areas he'll be very comfortable talking about. And he loves talking about formations and tactics and process. Less comfortable talking about the opposition. It'll always be the same answer. It's almost really not worth asking because he'll just say the opposition's going to be tough. The championship's tough, and except that's what he wants to talk about. So he's like last night, asked him about why he took off Meyender and not Isidore. Comfortable enough to talk about that, accepted responsibility for it. His decision. He thought Isidore had more in his legs because Meyender's played a lot recently. Fair enough. So you get a sense of where you can go and where you can't go with Regis Le Bris. I've noticed in the last month, maybe, press conferences have become a bit more laboured because I think he's almost like he's talked himself out. And it's that fatigue thing again, that malaise. It's almost like we joke actually when he comes in. Oh, here we are again. See you again on Thursday. So that has become, I think, something where it's getting harder, and it will get easier again in the next few weeks because we will be getting to the playoffs. But we're in that no man's land at the moment between 38 games and the end of the season and wanting the playoffs and caught in that vacuum, if you like.
Yeah, but you mentioned, the potential need for a cattle prod or, some sort of catalyst that, and he appears very calm. Every answer, which I like that about him. And I think there's most situations that is a very, very good thing. But you're talking about the potential need for that kind of spark. Has he got that in his locker?
I think he has. I don't think it's something we see. He's very, very, I think that it's quite illuminating when he's spoken about those conversations he's had to have with Chris Mepham and Wilson Isidore and Meyender and Alan Brown, that I think, that he knows what he wants. He's very driven as to his ambitions and where he wants to take the team. He's not afraid to make difficult decisions. I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are times when he's, lost his temper in the dressing room or on the training pitch, but we don't get to see that. He is very level. He's very grounded. He's very much, it reminds me very much of Tony Mowbray, who always used to say, there's no point going up there and there's no point going right down the bottom. You've got to maintain that level middle ground, if you like, because, it can change very quickly. And Regis is very much like that. He doesn't get carried away when they've won, but he doesn't get downhearted when they've lost. He will argue, look, it's football. We'll lose games. We win games. We'll draw games. And he's right. And so he is, he's minded in that sense to remain very, very grounded, but he is very, as I say, he's very driven, very ambitious. His whole focus, I think, in life generally is football. I don't actually think he's, outside of the training ground and the Stadium of Light. I don't think he has got much of, with all due respect, I don't think he's got much of a life. I think his full focus is on the football.
Just listening to this, Gav, where do you stand with, that kind of need for a spark, need for, like Nick says, the cattle prod, there's something to kind of get us back into life? Because it is interesting to hear that, with that mental fatigue with the season and the position that we're in, that we're not really chasing anything, and we might not only need a couple more wins to kind of secure a playoff place.
Just to go back to what Nick was talking about there, and it's something we've talked a lot about with this manager, but he's very process driven. I think everybody knows the way he works within the club and outside the club. Now we're all there was a grey area there when this regime, I guess, took over when we were in League One, about like how are decisions made, how is this done, what way does the club actually work. I think we're all very well versed in that now, so it's very easy to kind of get into the mindset of what he's trying to do with this team and what he's trying to do per game and build us up to the playoffs, where ordinarily you might be sat around going, bloody hell, why are we not doing this, why are we not doing that. So I think that considered, he takes each game exactly the same. There's no over emotional decision making. There's no press conferences where you come out of it and you think, why has he said that, or who's he upset there? And I just think that generally when you span it over an entire season, that can only be a good thing, because when, as Nick just said, when there's been times to get really emotional about something, perhaps last night could have been that thing. You know, how many managers in the past, or you think of a Neil Warnock or a who was the guy at Oxford, Carl Robinson, he's quite emotional characters. Just these type of managers who would have definitely come out after a game like that and would have went absolutely mental about the referee, the way that Preston had gone on. There's none of that with him. And that's basically his behaviour with everything. And that must be such a good thing for young players when you're around a person like that, because ultimately all you're doing is focusing on your football. You're not getting embroiled in things which have got nothing to do with what's going on the pitch. I do wish we were a little bit more fiery at times, but I always say this. I think when you look at how well we've done this season, it's not been by accident, and there's no real reason to tear up the handbook and start from scratch and try and reinvent the wheel in many respects, because ultimately what he's done to this point has got us this far. So yeah, there'll be moments hopefully in a playoff final, you know, if we get to Wembley, where you remember the last time we got there, it was very much a case of the players who turned up on the day knew they were going to win. They just had this massive belief within themselves. But I think that's built. Alex Neil got a lot of credit for that, because what he did was he ignored the noise. People were asking him in press conferences about, what about the atmosphere when we play in the semi-final? It's going to be a tough game at Hillsborough, and he just wasn't bothered. And I kind of get that same impression from this manager, where I don't think any of that stuff bothers him. I think he just focuses on the football.
No, I agree.
So,
I think it's interesting, because I had a conversation this morning with someone about the team this season, and they were complaining really about the team, and they were disappointed and felt that they weren't, I don't think, giving Sunderland enough praise for what they've achieved this season. I think it's easy to lose sight of the fact that they are fourth behind three Premier League teams, basically, way out in fourth place, ahead of everybody else. And when you look at where they started the season or ended last season, everybody's assumption, I think, was that it would be a mid-table season. They would, flounder about in that sort of area. Nobody that I know would have predicted a playoff spot. Certainly wouldn't have predicted them to be fourth or being a maintained fourth through the whole season, and potentially be in a Wembley final. Because I think, the way that this team is set up and the way that they play, over two legs, they've got a very, very good chance of getting to Wembley. And they've built up such a team spirit. I think they're so driven as a team, before it's potentially, if they don't go up, broken up, because we'll see some players leave. They've built such a team spirit, and they're so driven to achieve promotion at the end of the season. And I think we perhaps sometimes need to step back and take the umbrella view of what Regis Le Bris has achieved with this team this season, in the face of losing players like Mundell for considerable period of time, and losing the Faye now until towards the end of the season, or the end of after the international break. So it's one of those things which almost like we're almost looking for little things to pick at, because that's just the nature of watching football, isn't it? But overall, I think you've got you can only stand back and applaud what this team's achieved so far this season.
Yeah, and I'm sure Gav sent me, because I don't really look on social media, but I'm sure Gav sent me something the other day that was someone on social media saying we should sack the manager ahead of the playoffs, which would, of course, be a really sensible thing to do based on how the season's gone so far.
Well, it'd be a very Sunderland thing to do, but
it might be an obvious answer to this question, but in terms of where the club are in, the journey of progressing under this regime, as Gav said, I mean, how important do you think it is that we do go up this year? Because for me, that the signing of Lefebvre was a huge signal that it's almost like they think that it should be in the schedule of their plan that we do get promoted?
I think it's that they've got a massive opportunity, and I think having come this far this season, that it's one you'd hope they do grasp, because my fear is if it fails this season, if they don't reach Wembley, they don't win at Wembley, that all the good work of the last 2 years in the progress that a player like Dan Neil or Jobe or Hume, Ballard, and you can go through the team, all the progress they've made over 2 years to get to this point is suddenly potentially going to evaporate in the summer, because I think they'll find it very hard to keep hold of Jobe. Probably keeping Dan Neil will be, I think, the whole issue about his contract, I suspect is he's waiting to see what division that Sunderland are going to be in next season. There'll be suitors for Hume, there'll be suitors for Ballard. Players will go. And I think the danger is then you start this whole 2-3 year cycle again, because the players that would have to come in to replace the Jobes and the Humes of this world aren't at the club at the moment. I don't think they're still a year away from that process, if you like, because of they will be there, but they may be a year behind the process or the speed of the process they want to see. So I think it's a massive opportunity for them, because even if they were to go up and potentially, have a season like Leicester, Southampton or Ipswich, they will be £100 million plus better off. And what a platform that is for the club to take it to the next level. And that opportunity is there for them at the moment. It's an extraordinary opportunity for them. And I think they've got the wherewithal to do it. But they've got to believe that they can do it. But it's football, isn't it? I mean, that's the beauty of it. We just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, we do know it's Coventry away next, who went on that run, won 9 out of the last 10 before getting beat at Derby on the same night as we drew with Preston. They've won 10 and drawn 3 out of 18 at home, so they've got decent home form. But also, we haven't won there in the last 12 attempts, going back to a 1-0 win in April 1985. So almost 40 years without a win at Coventry. But weirdly, and I touched on this at the beginning, I'm bizarrely more confident about this game than I was about the Preston game at home, which I'm sure says something, but I'm not quite sure what. But it's a tough one, Nick, isn't it?
It is. I mean, in fact, Marco's always scathing about these statistics. He says that, that it means nothing for this game, but I'm sort of superstitious sometimes. I think, those records are there for a reason, because, there's obviously some grounds that clubs go to and they always do well. There are others that they don't do well. But, they went to Middlesbrough this season where they hadn't won for a long time and won. So there's part of me, despite all the sort of doom mongering about going to Coventry this weekend, feels that this is the sort of game now this Sunderland team will probably go and win 1-0. So it's a fascinating game. I mean, it's the one game over the last, 3 or 4 weeks I've been really looking forward to, because I think it will be a good game, and because of Coventry's record. I think Sunderland will be fired up for it. I think it could be a fascinating afternoon, and it'll be very interesting to see how Coventry react to losing in the week. Because I personally have been surprised how well Frank Lampard's done there. So but as Coventry as always, they start the season slowly, they drag themselves into it, and then suddenly, before you know it, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So them being there is no surprise.
Yeah. Well, it could be that spark we were talking about. It might just take one game to do that. And I'm not sure if you're travelling down, Gav, but we always love the away fixture at Coventry, don't we?
No, I'm definitely not travelling down. I'm never going back there if I can help it. I hate the place. It's got to be the worst away day of the season. I hate it. Just in the middle of nowhere, you get charged through the nose. It's just like a soulless, horrible ground. And it's Coventry, innit? Like, who wants to be there? I'm no offence to anybody listening from Coventry, but it's probably my least favourite game of the season. And a lot of that's to do with the record there, if I'm being brutally honest. I think, how many times have you been there, Nick, and not seen something?
It's one of the strangest grounds in the world, because it's built like a conference centre, and then suddenly in the middle of the conference centre there's a football pitch. But we were there a couple of seasons ago. It was a lunchtime kickoff, And we stayed in a hotel probably 2 miles maximum away from the stadium. But I wasn't sure of the way to the stadium from the hotel. So I put Coventry City Football Club in the sat-nav, set off. 25 minutes later, we were like 15 miles out of Coventry in the countryside heading to Rugby. And yet the sat-nav was still saying it's taking us to Coventry City Football Club. We eventually turned off where it indicated for us to turn off into a little hamlet in the middle of nowhere, up this country lane. And then it says, you've arrived. Looked out the window and there's these big gates, Coventry City Training Ground. I just thought that sums Coventry up, doesn't it? You know?
Well, I was going to say over this run over 40 years, it's been at 3 different grounds. So obviously Highfield Road, we played at St Andrews one year.
Yeah.
And then
that one?
Yeah. And then the Rico Stadium, as I remember it. I can't even remember what it's called now. The Coventry
It's the
Building Society.
Coventry Building Society Stadium or something, isn't it now?
Yeah. How is it for the press though, Nick? I mean,
well, actually, it's a bit weird because the press room's in the bowels of the buildings. You have to go underground, if you like, into the press room where the media theatre is and the press room. The food, as I recall, is okay. I don't think there's an issue there. The press box is a good work. It's a good press box to work, but it's in one half of the half, if you like. So probably not as central as you'd prefer, but it's in terms of working, it's a good ground to work, but it's just fine. I just find it odd. It's always, I feel slightly discombobulated in the place. It's just, it doesn't feel like a proper football stadium to me. It's a little bit like West Ham and the London Stadium, it just doesn't feel right, doesn't.
Not for football.
I mean, there's talk, isn't? I mean, the irony was that just as they sorted out all their issues and got a 6 or 7 year lease on the ground, it all went pear-shaped again, didn't it? So with the owners, and so I'm not quite sure what the plan is, because I think there is a plan to build yet another new stadium, but I don't know how advanced that is.
Yeah, well, I think I've decided actually, Gav, after speaking to Nick and George, that we should make it a regular feature of talking about what the bait's like at every ground in the country and see what the journalists rate each stadium. Gav, quickly, I mean, I don't know how you see this one going. What are you thinking?
I can't see us winning, if I'm honest. Even if we had been unbeaten all season and Coventry were bottom of the league, having lost every single game and not scored a goal, I still don't think we'd win. That's how confident I am when we play Coventry. So, yeah, not filled with a lot of hope for this one. What would be really, really good though, right? And I'm saying this, and I'm sort of saying half tongue in cheek, but if we did get a win against Coventry, I think that would really boost people's morale going into the playoffs, because there's a high chance we could play them. Again, as I've kept saying, we've not played very well against Coventry for years now. So if we can win that game against an informed team who we might play in the playoffs, I think that would really put a pep in our step, not just as a team, but as a club, the fan base, everybody, thinking, all right, we're actually, maybe we are a step up from some of these teams that we might be playing in the playoffs. But it's a tough one. I think back to that game earlier in the season, when, you're sitting with your pipe and slippers really thinking we've won this, and then we go and chuck it away against a team who were in disarray at the time. I mean, I can't remember, had Mark Robbins left at that point?
I think he had, hadn't he?
Yeah,
caretaker manager, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's interesting. It's an interesting point, because it's going into the international break, and if they do lose on Saturday, it's almost that feeling going back to that everybody's a little bit sort of, we're not playing well, are we? Is this going to start falling apart? But if they do win, I think we're going back to that. Maybe that's the cattle prod moment. Maybe that's the moment where everybody then goes into the international break on a high, looking forward to Millwall, looking forward to the last games of the season, looking to build on that. And so I think it's a bit of a sort of watershed game in a way. It's a bit of a crossroads for Sunderland at the moment, with the games that are left and the playoffs coming up.
Yeah, well, because I was looking at the most points over the last 5 years to make the playoffs of 75 points, which would mean 2 more wins. So I mean, from your point, I mean, how do you see it actually playing out the rest of the season? Because I can't remember Sunderland ever being in these positions very often where, we have the end of the season where there's not actually, we almost achieve the target, earlier than the end of the season or earlier than the last day drama or whatever. But I mean, how do you see it playing out? And, obviously being, the forward type of thinking person that you are. I mean, have you already started thinking about logistics for London potentially?
Yes. Well, I mean, I booked the hotel for the final, but just out of pragmatism. I mean, it just seemed, I think it's daft not to have done that because there's every chance Sunderland could be in the final. But I think in terms of the play out of the rest of the season, I'm sort of resigned to this sort of. I don't think they're going to win 9 games. Put it that way. I don't. This team is not going to go on a 9-game winning streak because it just hasn't done that all season. So why is it going to do it now? My thought process is they're going to go in, win 2 or 3, draw 1, maybe lose 1, win again, but they'll be by this stage they'll have won the 2 or 3 games they need to be in the playoffs. That will be a certainty. I've said for a long time, I'm convinced they're going to finish 4th. They've been 4th pretty much all season, and they just don't seem to move from that position. Even when all the teams around them lose, or they had 7 matches, they didn't win a game, they're still 4th. So I think, I'm just looking at Sunderland. They'll finish 4th. They'll have the second leg of the semi-finals at home. That's a bonus as well. And as Gav said earlier, you can't worry about who you're going to play in that semi-final because, the chances are it'll be one of those teams you're going to have to face that you don't want to play either in the semi-finals or in the final. So you've just got to go in believing in yourselves and being in your best form.
Yeah. No, and just out of interest, you booked your travel lodge yet, Gav?
No. No, but I probably should actually. I think the trains are actually a little bit cheaper already, and you can cancel them. So I'm humming and hawing. I might. I just feel like I'm tempting fate too much if I do that.
That's it. We'll see how it all plays out, I suppose. But I suppose that just leaves me to say thank you very much for your time, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, and
no
hopefully
problem.
We'll catch up in the run-in.
Catch up at Wembley.
Yes. Yeah, we'll do a live recording or something.
All right. Or we'll do a podcast after the manager's been sacked. Semi-finals.
Yeah. Good stuff. And cheers as always, Gav. Always brightens my perspective on things when you say everything is all good.
Yeah. Glass half full, Henderson. That's my name.
That's it. Should be. That's how we should present you from now on. But thanks again for everyone for listening. We've got loads of stuff planned, so please subscribe or hit the like button and all that jazz, because I don't know what the buttons are anymore. I never really look, if I'm completely honest, but it all does help as we have started this new venture of How We're the Podcast. I think Gav will probably start recording the next pod as soon as we finish this one, to be honest, knowing him. So look out for that. And check out the Roker Report website for all the bits and pieces we have on there, such as an interesting Q&A Martin did with Brett Angel, which should be up very soon, which I'm kind of stopped myself from asking questions about because I want to read it when he sticks it up. So I'm looking forward to that going up. And of course, we'll have all the build up to the Coventry game as well. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.